The British colony of Hong Kong consists of three principal areas of land: the island of Hong Kong, the Kowloon Peninsula on the Chinese mainland, and the adjacent and new territories. These were leased from the Chinese for 99 years. The lease expires in 1997. Between the island and the mainland lies the almost landlocked Victoria Harbour, considered by many to be one of the most beautiful in the world. Here there is a constant flow of shipping: ferries, passenger ships, cargo ships, large and small, junks and sampans. The Star Ferry, which travels between Kowloon and Hong Kong Island, carries thousands of Chinese backwards and forwards every day. It departs every few minutes and is ridiculously cheap. On the island we explore that area popularly known as the ladder streets, because many of these streets consist of steep steps and are not suitable for wheeled vehicles. We were fascinated and intrigued by the teeming crowds of people, the market-type shops, and all the strange foods and signs. Double-decker trams, which run on the island only, are unbelievably crowded, and although we made many attempts to get aboard, finally had to give up in despair. This attractive square was a pleasant stopping place between the Star Ferry terminal and the shopping and business area. Still on the island, we visited the Tiger Balm Gardens, which were laid out in 1935 around the home of the late Mr. Aw Boon Haw, one of the originators of the famous Tiger Balm ointment. The gardens cover 8 acres and consist of grottos and pavilions displaying effigies from Chinese mythology. The colours are flamboyant and the statues grotesque. After leaving Tiger Balm Gardens, we drove across the island to Repulse Bay, the best-known beach resort in the colony, named after a British man-of-war. Repulse Bay is relatively small but picturesque, and the beach is broad and clean. It appeared to afford a very safe bathing, but to ensure the safety of the bather, the lifesavers had their lookout tower, while one paddled to and fro in the water, keeping an eye out on the crowd as a further safety measure. Further along the coast is Aberdeen, Hong Kong's main fishing village, and where 20,000 people live on 3,000 vessels in the harbour. We had ample opportunity to view these water homes as we rode among them in a sampan. The harbour is so chock-a-block with vessels, it's a mystery how some of them manage to manoeuvre, and on several occasions our sampan collided with others. It was quite curious to see, among such squalor and apparent poverty, things such as TV sets and sewing machines. Many of these people know of no other life. They are born here and usually choose to live and die on these boats. In the late afternoon of the next day, we returned to Aberdeen to be taken out to one of the huge floating restaurants where we had an excellent Chinese dinner. These floating restaurants are something to be seen to be believed. They are almost like palaces, and as night comes on, they are gaily lit up and make a very colourful spectacle. After our dinner, we returned to our car and travelled by way of the tunnel under Victoria Harbour back to Kowloon, and spent the remainder of the evening at a nightclub, watching excerpts from Chinese folk tales and opera. All the dancers and performers were beautifully dressed and were both graceful and elegant in all their movements. No Chinese opera or folk tale seems quite complete without a dragon or a lion. The next afternoon, we visited a model Chinese village of long ago. Built at Lai Chi Kok by a Hong Kong businessman, it is a recreation of a village of the Sung dynasty period of 700 years ago. All the guides and staff are dressed in costumes of the Sung period, and visitors are able to sample food, wine and entertainment. The Sung dynasty was chosen as Emperor Ping of that period is the only Chinese emperor ever to have visited Hong Kong, and he came to escape from the invading Mongolians. In the tea house, we sampled snowflake tea while musicians played traditional Chinese music on ancient stringed instruments. after which we were entertained by some very clever jugglers. At the huge village meeting house, we were treated to an afternoon tea of Chinese snacks and green tea. And afterwards we watched a traditional wedding procession of the Sung period. Red, of course, is dominant in all things Chinese, as is considered a lucky colour. After a short time in an interesting wax museum, we visited the home of a nobleman who had his own waterfall at the entrance to his garden. And from the upstairs balcony he would have been able to watch most of the goings-on in the village. Every morning, just across the road from our hotel, many Chinese could be seen doing slow exercises in the early morning fog. This appears to be quite a ritual with the Chinese. The thousands of Chinese signs which covered the front of buildings and hung across roadways never failed to interest us. These large shield-shaped decorations are hung over the entrance to a restaurant where a party is being held. They are known as Fa Pai. The names of those being honoured and other details of the party are depicted in Chinese characters. Half an hour's walk along Canton Road brought us to the jade market, where all sorts of pieces of jade were being sold, mostly of a poor quality, although that did not stop hordes of people, both European and Chinese, looking for a bargain. A little further along we came to a general market where fruit and vegetables and fish and clothing were on display, and some articles of foodstuff which we couldn't put a name to. These are known as 100-year-old eggs, although today they only take 2 or 3 weeks to prepare. They are treated in some way with arsenic and then covered with mud and rice husks. The day we traversed the new territories, which as I mentioned will revert to China in 1997, our first stop was made at Castle Peak Bay, a fishing village and beach resort. The new territories consist of 365 square miles of country between Kowloon Peninsula and China. This ancient land is the last place on the continent of Asia where the old rural life of China still exists, almost untouched. In the kiosk along the beach, the rattle of the mahjong sets was dominant, as the Chinese were engrossed in one of their favourite pastimes. And the Chinese peasant was working in the fields very much as his ancestors had done before him. This urn out in the fields contains the bones of some peasant, while relatives wait until such time as there is enough money for a ceremonial burial. From the village of Lok Ma Chau, we are able to look through the bamboo curtain across the Shumchun River, which forms the boundary with the Chinese mainland, and in the distance we could discern a red Chinese village. And as the sun was setting back on Victoria Harbour, our thoughts pondered the future of this wonderfully vital and successful British colony lying under the yellow shadow of 1,000 million Chinese.